All right, let's get right into it. We're going to look at this really fascinating story of how huge policy changes actually happen. We're going to pull back the curtain on the messy, real-world process that turns big ideas into actual law. And we're going to use a fantastic case study to do it.
I mean, you've seen this happen a million times, right? A government announces some grand plan to fix a massive problem. Think healthcare, education, you name it. It sounds amazing, it makes total sense, and then poof, nothing. It just stalls, gets watered down, or completely disappears. So why does that happen so often?
Well, to figure this out, we're going to jump back in time to Thailand, specifically between 1970 and 1996. Now, the country's health sector was facing some really serious challenges, and pretty much everyone knew it. So here's the puzzle. Why did a country that knew it had a problem just fail to come up with a solution? That's what we're here to solve. So, let's start unpacking this whole policy puzzle. Here's the thing. If you go looking for some neat, orderly, rational planning process, you're going to miss the whole story. The real answer, the key, is in understanding the powerful groups, the players, who are all competing for influence on this policy stage. Okay, so who exactly were these key players? Let's meet the cast. And this, right here, illustrates the central conflict perfectly. See, for decades, Thailand was what political scientists call a bureaucratic polity. Basically, a system where unelected officials, top dogs in the civil service and the military, were the ones calling all the shots. But starting in the 70s, rapid economic growth created a brand new force, super powerful business elites, who were starting to use their financial muscle to get political influence. But hold on, it wasn't just a simple two-way fight. The whole policy arena was actually pretty crowded. You had non-governmental organizations or NGOs advocating for the public. You had a pretty free press that was shining a light on different issues. You had health professionals who were highly respected by everyone. And, of course, the royal family, which held this incredible amount of informal influence. So all of these groups were in the mix. So how did all these power dynamics actually play out on the ground? Well, let's start with the absolutely explosive and totally unplanned growth of private hospitals. Just look at these numbers. Seriously, in 1962, there were only 4 non-public hospitals in all of Thailand. By the 1990s, there were over 110. This massive, massive boom happened almost entirely without any direction or control from the official Ministry of Public Health. So how on earth did that happen? Well, it was a classic case of power politics. Those rising economic elites used their influence to push for pro-market policies. They got the really powerful board of investment to give out tax breaks, basically treating hospitals like any other growing business. And all the while, the Ministry of Health was seen as kind of weak politically, and it just couldn't stop this unregulated expansion. Policy was definitely being made, just not by the people who were officially supposed to be in charge of it. All right, now for our second big clue. The incredibly long and difficult fight to create a national social security system. And listen, this wasn't some quick debate over policy details. The idea of Social Security was first proposed way back in the 1930s. For over 60 years, it was blocked by powerful interests. It was only in 1990, after literal decades of struggle, that a new group of supporters finally got strong enough to push it over the finish line. Now, this is what I find so interesting. This slide just lays out the battle lines so clearly. On one side, you had this whole coalition of trade unions, NGOs, and the media. For them, this was a symbol of progress, of a more democratic society. And on the other side, you had the old guard, the bureaucratic elites and the new business elites who were worried about losing power and, of course, the cost to employers. The bill's success had absolutely nothing to do with having a perfect plan. It was all about one coalition finally overpowering the other. So what do we got? An unplanned private sector boom? A 60-year political fight? What does all this messy reality tell us about how policy actually gets made? The big takeaway here is this idea of critical mass. Major policy change doesn't get triggered by a brilliant report or some flawless logical argument. Nope. It happens when a diverse coalition of supporters, politicians, NGOs, the media, whoever, manages to build enough combined power to just overcome the resistance from those who like things just the way they are. You see, this whole case study, it just completely flips the script on how we usually think about policymaking. We're taught the textbook version, right? This neat, rational process. But the reality, as we just saw in Thailand, is a messy, unpredictable, and super intense power struggle. It's really less like engineering and a whole lot more like a battle. And that is the real lesson here. And this way of looking at things doesn't just apply to Thailand in the 20th century, it applies to almost any policy debate happening right now in any country. So the next time you see a headline about some major new initiative, don't just ask if it's a good idea on paper. Instead, ask yourself, who are the players? Who's for this and who's against it? And ultimately, who has that critical mass of power to make it happen? Because that is almost always the question that really matters.